Hey everyone, in my last video I went over flashing the SonicPad firmware through recovery mode. In my case I was having a bunch of different weird problems with my SonicPad and that fixed all of them. If you watched that video and you were having problems, hopefully it's helped you out. If you haven't seen it and you're having problems, I'll put the link at the top of the screen. And one of the main problems I was having was the inability to flash the March 2023 firmware onto my SonicPad. I've gotten that firmware upgraded now, and one of the first things I wanted to try was a filament change. I've seen a lot of people having problems with it on different forums. I gave it a try. It took me a little while, but I have it working reliably now. And I'm going to go over how I got it working. Hopefully, as always, it helps you guys out. If it does, please click the like button, click the subscribe button, and let's get right into it. One quick note, as always, I'm going to be using my setup for this video. That is a SonicPad connected to a CR10S Pro V2, and I'm using Cura 5.1.2 as my slicer. If you're using something else, you might see a few small differences here and there, but this video should give you the instructions you need regardless. Like I said at the top of the video, I'm a little late getting the March 2022 update, but I needed to do some multicolor prints with some filament changes anyway, so that's one of the first things I wanted to try out. Since the updates come out, I've seen a bunch of comments on different forums and Reddit and Facebook groups that the filament change doesn't work. So I wanted to give it a try for myself, and I can tell you, for me, at least at first, it did not work, just like everyone says. Luckily, I'm going to go through the process that I used to get it working, and you guys can take a look. Hopefully, it'll apply to your setup. So once we get into Cura, the first thing we're going to do is load our model. In this case, it is a sign I'm setting up to put by my laser, just goofy sign. It's going to be a yellow background with black lettering on top of it. This one for me is a little big, so we're just going to scale it down a little bit. We'll drop it to 60%. And yeah, that's a little bit better. I'm not going to go through all the print settings that I have in here. At the moment, it's really not important for the purposes of this video. One thing that we definitely need to do, however, is figure out what layer we're going to change colors at. So to do that, we're just going to slice this. And I go to the preview window. And basically I start raising the layers from the bottom up. And as soon as I hit the layer where I'm going to want it to be black, that is where I know my layer change is going to be at. So the layer change is going to start at layer number 10 in this case. Obviously we don't want to use 9 because we'll have a bunch of yellow and a top layer of black covering the whole thing. So layer 10 it is. Now what we want to do here, the first time I tried this, we want to add a script. If you're wondering which one, you guessed it, it's filament change. Obviously we need to put in the layer of the layer change, which is going to be 10. And the first time I tried to do this, I left these settings all as they were because I had previously used them with an M600 macro I had been using. If you do that with the new firmware, it's just not going to even attempt to do a layer change because now the M600 command is in the firmware. So you need to check off use firmware configuration. From there, personally, I don't change the Z position. You could potentially do that if you wanted to move the print head up before the filament change. In my case, I didn't bother with it. So you just want to close that and slice it again. Now, when I tried to print that, I thought everything would work great, but unfortunately I ended up with an error. You may have seen this error. It's been coming up for a lot of people. Well, that sucks. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. A lot of you are thinking, well, this is easy to fix. It's telling me exactly what to do. It's telling me what the max extrude distance is set for, and it's telling me what it needs. I'll just go ahead and change this. Well, that's exactly what I did. In my case, I needed to change the maximum to 550, and it printed just fine. I was able to do my layer change, and everything worked great. But there's a catch. It worked great for that print. The next sign I tried to print was a little bit bigger, and I got the error. And now the maximum wasn't, 530. The maximum was 1250. That's a problem. Now, in my research, what I finally found out is the problem is that your settings of the firmware are using absolute extrusion. And basically what's happening is as it prints, your extruder gets reset to 0, usually after your first prime line when you go to print. From there, it starts counting out how much extrusion it's done. When it hits the layer change, it tries to roll that back. So it's basically trying to retract any distance that's been printed from the moment that print started all the way to the layer change. The problem with that is as you get into bigger prints, your retraction when the layer change happens can end up being literally tens of meters. Obviously, that's not going to work. Like I said, changing that option might work for a smaller print, but in the big scheme of things, what's going to happen is it's going to retract. If it does work, if you were to change that value to 100,000, it's going to retract your filament all the way out of the extruder, and it's going to keep retracting, and it's just going to grind your gears in your extruder, which is not a good thing. So the fix is to change your settings in your slicer to use relative values for your extrusion. I'll show you how to do that right now. So back in Cura, what we want to do in our print profile, the first thing we want to do, you can just search for relative. And if you scroll down under special modes, you will see a check mark for relative extrusion. If you have your tooltips enabled, it'll explain it. But basically what it's going to do is every time there's an extrusion action, it's going to reset the value that it's currently at to 0. So it's not just going to be a running count of how much you've extruded throughout your whole print. If you, say in this instance, do one side of the triangle, as soon as it changes directions, it's going to reset that value to 0 and then do a relative extrusion for each extrusion action throughout the whole print. Now, that alone is not going to fix the whole thing because for whatever reason, the firmware, even though they changed the firmware, your printer's still going to try to use absolute values for your extrusion. So the other thing you need to do is go into your settings in Cura, to your printer, and go to Manage Printers. Find your printer and choose Machine Settings. And what you want to do is in your Start G code, you want to add an M83 command. And sorry, the tool tip pops up whenever you're in that window. You want to add the M83 command. That's going to tell the printer at the very beginning of the print to use relative extrusion. Once you've made that change, just close that, close your settings, and reslice. Once you reslice, send it to your printer and give it another try. From what I've noticed, it will work perfectly for any size file that I've personally tried to run so far. Now, there's a couple other things you want to be aware of if you're using the March 2022 firmware upgrade for the SonicPad. Again, before this, I used an M600 macro. There's a really good one out there called Mom, the mother of all macros. The firmware layer change that's built in now is not as full featured as something like that. It's honestly not even as full featured as the M600 command in the Tiny Machines firmware that I was using before I got the SonicPad. All it's going to do when you hit the layer change is pause the print, do a little bit of retraction, and you're free to unload and load new filament at that point. A couple things that a lot of other methods use. It doesn't do a purge when you load the new filament. The mother of all macros and even the Tiny Machines firmware, after you would load the new filament, you would have the option to do a purge, and it would just extrude X millimeters of filament to get to the new color. If you just do the stock settings, it's going to pause the print, let you unload the filament, let you load new filament, and when you resume the print, you're going to have several millimeters of the old color still. So if you're trying to do something where you want that color change to be immediate, you're going to need to do a manual purge of the filament on your own. Again, there's no automated way to do it currently. To do that, you just have to go back to the SonicPad interface. And once you're there, you'll see when the layer changes currently under the tool section. You don't have the option to extrude or retract, but as soon as the pause starts, you can manually do a retract or extrude from the web interface. I honestly haven't tried to do it from the SonicPad itself during a pause, but I believe that that is not going to be an option because you're going to have the dialog box on the SonicPad to just give you the option to cancel or resume the print. So that's it. We've successfully been able to do a filament change with the new firmware. It's obviously not the perfect solution from Creality thus far. Hopefully in the future they'll make some tweaks, allow for a purge directly from the SonicPad console. Who knows what they're planning? Who knows what they're going to implement? But at least for now, we have a way to do it. And you can see here, the quality of the prints came out pretty good. I don't have any problems with layer adhesion between the colors, nothing like that. It works fairly well. So with that, I will let you guys give it a try. Hopefully it works out for you. And like I always say, if this is helping you, hopefully my videos are helping a lot of people. Please click the like button, hit subscribe, more content to come. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks.